Hi all, today we're going to be talking about the Von Sovereignty's Carbine Directive. It's just like other weapon directives in that it will demand 5 Araxieums for you to unlock its reward, the Eclipse, and it is pretty generic in terms of how unique it is. You've got your standard Von Carbines that aren't anything too special, you've got your NS option that isn't anything too special, and you've got your final reward, which is a slight variant on your Solstice. Overall, it's a relatively easy directive to complete as there's not anything terribly bad in here, but there's also not anything super good in here either, which means that whether you actually want to complete it or not will honestly depend more on if you enjoy playing light assault and you'd like a neat little shiny carbine. The Eclipse itself is a fine reward. It is essentially a Solstice that gets access to heat and has some other small adjustments to it, such as its attachment lineup and the fact it gets an impulse launcher built in, which is unique to it and the other directive carbines. On the whole, it is a pretty safe directive to do because the Eclipse itself is not a bad reward, it's just not a super good reward. Unless you really want a shiny little directive carbine, you are arguably a bit better putting your time elsewhere into something like a Beetlegeese. However, if you enjoy playing Light Assault, it is absolutely a fine reward for your time. So personally, I did this directive before the Horizon was put in the game. So I did the 11C, the Solstice, the Zenith, the Pulsar C, and the VX 6-7. They are all relatively solid options, but I will be going over each carbine individually and if I think it's worth your time or not. So, let's move over to the Light Assault tab. So you have quite a few options here. Of course, the Eclipse is your reward. It is a very nice reward. Unfortunately, it's just not anything special, and because it's built on the Solstice, it does kind of fall behind in terms of it's not super competitively viable. But it is a fun reward. It has some unique gimmicks going for it that make it interesting to use, but it's not a must-have directive weapon by any means. So, the 11C. The 11C is, in my opinion, a great filler carbine. If you've done 3 or 4 of your other carbines and want just a nice little easy Araxium, the 11C is great. Unfortunately, its DPS is pretty low and it's pretty average in all regards, but being a nano-systems weapon, you get 0.75 ADS and it is generally very easy to use. It also has a relatively wide attachment lineup, so it's a pretty safe option should you want to knock out a carbine for the directive. That said, you can pretty safely skip it if you find something else you'd rather do. The Prominence. Some of you who are older players may remember this carbine as the Solstice SF. It is just okay, I would probably skip it. Essentially, it's a Solstice that has more attachment variety going for it, such as, all your underbarrel grenades, there's an extended mag here, there's both your ammo types here, there's more barrel options. It is essentially, at core, a Solstice that just has a little bit more options in exchange for worse damage output. It's very easy to control, but its lower DPS output on a Solstice, which already is not particularly exciting, means that it's pretty safely skippable. You'd probably be better off doing the 11C as it is similarly easy to control, while also having 0.75 ADS. The Pulsar C should absolutely be on your list. It's easily one of the standouts of the Von Carbine arsenal, and being a 167 damage model carbine, will also hit harder than pretty much all the other weapons available to you for this directive. It's easy to use, it slaps people in the head if you're really good at aiming, it kills quickly, it's a really, really nice carbine. You can make it work in close range, you can make it work in long range, it's just super comfortable to use, and I absolutely recommend you put it in your directive lineup. It's worth doing. The Serpent is up to the player. I personally skipped it. Serpent has extremely high damage output, being 845 and 143, making it arguably tied for the fastest killing infantry weapon in the game on body shots, with weapons like the GD7F. But that's really all it does effectively. It is an absolute bullet hose in close ranges. Past those ranges, its cone of fire is not very good, its reload speed is relatively slow compared to other mono carbines, the velocity is junk, and the recoil pattern is kind of yikes. If you just want to bullet hose people at close ranges, it is a fine Araxium. I personally could not put up with it, and I skipped it because it wasn't versatile enough for me. Whether you Araxium the Serpent or not is up to you, but I personally just didn't do it. The Solstice Burst is an easy skip. It's just the Solstice that has burst built in and better recoil patterns to make up for this. It's not anything special, and the Pulsar C will fight at range better and at close range better. It is an extremely forgettable weapon, there's absolutely no reason to put it on your list. I barely scraped 30 kills on it. It's just not good. It's not worth your time. The Horizon, as I stated, I did not do it in my directive, and I've not used it a whole lot. However, general community consensus that I've been paying attention to states it's a very good carbine, and the time that I have spent with it, it is a very, very nice carbine to use. I would absolutely recommend Araxiuming it. It is unique compared to other ones, being kind of a pellet-based weapon, but an actually good one. And in general, it's just a fun carbine. I would absolutely recommend doing the Horizon. The VX6 TAC 7 is good. In my personal opinion, for me, it was a straight upgrade on the Serpent. In comparison to the Serpent, the VX6 TAC 7 has a little bit less fire rate in exchange for better stats elsewhere. You have a better velocity, you have a significantly better reload speed, the control is better, the accuracy is better. Also, you get 0.75 ADS. It's just, for me personally, the VX6 TAC 7 had everything the Serpent didn't for a very slight DPS loss. I would definitely recommend doing the VX6 TAC 7, but you can do it alongside the Serpent if you'd like. I just would recommend having this in your lineup just because it's extremely comfortable to use while also packing good damage output. The Zenith is a tricky one. I will note that I Araxiumed it before the Arsenal update, or the Armory update, or whatever they call it now. So I personally do not have much use with its new options available, such as high velocity, unstable, all the new rail options, etc. When I Araxiumed it personally, I didn't find it was anything special, and it really just feels like a slightly beefed up Solstice. I would argue it's better than the Solstice. You get 0.75 ADS, for example, but it's not anything special. If you want to do more interesting weapons, I think you can pretty safely skip the Zenith, but if you're looking for a filler carbine, it is a fine option here. So you don't have bad weapons in here, you just have a lot of they're okay or they're filler. You know, you have your standout VX6, you have your standout Horizon, and you have your standout Pulse RC. But your other two carbines, whether it's the Serpent, the Zenith, the 11C, or the Prominence, you know, you're going to be stuck with probably one or two mediocre carbines, or carbines that you just don't care for here. It's just unfortunate, but that's the way it is. I would personally recommend kind of splicing your preferred carbines in with your bad carbines. So for example, you know, I really didn't care for the 11C at the time, so I did it as my second carbine so that I would enjoy my directive more down the line. Personally, I would also recommend Araxiuming the Solstice, even though it is not a very good weapon, solely because it will give you a very good feel for what the Eclipse is going to perform like. You can absolutely skip the Solstice if you want, but personally I found it helped give me a basis for what the Eclipse would play like. So that one's up to you, but it's just a personal recommendation on my end. Much like other weapon directives, you also get two banners, both of which look relatively solid. You know, they're not anything particularly great, but if you're in the market for a new banner on your character, you can absolutely do it. It's just, you know, you probably have a better banner available elsewhere, but, you know, it's a nice little side reward. So, as a whole, I think the directive is pretty good. I don't think it's anything super special or super interesting, mostly because the weapons here are just kind of eh. But, you know, the Eclipse is a cool little reward. I will also note that it has been, oh god, 5 years since I completed this directive. But it is a good directive. You know, the weapons in here are, some of them are bad, some of them are good. And the Eclipse is interesting enough to, in my opinion, be worth grabbing over the regular Solstice. But if you're not one for carbines or for light assault play, I think it's pretty safely skippable in favor of doing one of your own preferred directives over it, or if you just want to have a good directive weapon, I'd probably unlock the Beetlegeese first. Nonetheless, it's a fine Araxium. And you know what? If nothing else, you get the sweet neuron activation of 100 more directive score points being added to your account. So that's all I have to say on the VS Carbine directive. Yeah, so thank you if you're still here, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye.